Explain why prosperity was bad and boring. Why prosperity was bad and boring. I don't know what you mean by that. Why was prosperity boring? Why did the prosperity patch not work? I'm not sure what your question is. I didn't realize that you were a founder either, Midnight Space Monarchy. That's really cool. You've been here for a while then. All right, yeah. So tomorrow, if there's a lot to go over, we'll go over patch notes and that's it. Otherwise, we'll play some Valkyrie. If not, then we'll do the Valkyrie on Wednesday. And then starting Thursday, we'll be getting ready for the hunt. We'll probably like look up some or like try to figure out some good builds in general. So guys, if you want to do some investments, I expect to see assault frigates get used a lot. Command destroyers to a lesser extent. Tech 1 destroyers, assault frigates are going to be probably the biggest ones used. Yeah. I heard that prosperity was boring, and that's why they started the scarcity. Oh, okay. No. Prosperity is what they call now, sort of. So pre-scarcity, the problem that we had increasingly was that when everybody was kind of given the tools to just build their own kind of world, especially nullsec, they rather than escalate to further conflict, the apex strategy was to turtle and crab harder. And so from 2015 to 2019, you see this massive expansion in both the availability and the use of capitals and super capitals, which already felt oppressive to the game prior to this. The introduction of the Rook Wall rebalance and kind of some of the other mining changes made it so that mineral prices collapsed. So things were cheap and available, but there wasn't any meaning behind anything. No one gave a shit. You could smash 100 Macarials into somebody, and it was like less than half of the price it would be now. And what people complained about was that nothing was meaningful. They couldn't actually hurt their enemy. Asset safety hurt this as well. And so the world kind of entered into an increasing state of stagnation where no real new content was disrupting things. The player base was complaining that nothing was really going on. The wealthy people were just turbo crabbing, increasing disparity between the haves and the have-nots, all that kind of stuff. And they saw a trend that this was only going to get worse. So they changed it. Let me see if I can find the graph. One second. I think I have it in my imager. There it is. So this image, let's see if I can pull this up as like its own tab. There we go. So basically what I did was I took all of the price indices charts over time and put them all against each other. So if you notice, if you look, the top line is produced. So this is production. Below this is a flatter line, which is destruction, and a more sporadic line, which is mined. This is important because, as you can see, at some point they change the color of things, right? So production is actually green, destroyed becomes blue, and mined becomes orange. No, it changes again. Never mind. So what you see here is like, whoops. So if this is 2014, 2015, 2016, do you see how this major bump up in production happened around 2016 into 2017? This massive spike in production and this high continuing level of production. That, look, destruction, this flatter line here, which is now blue, remains relatively stable. There's a couple of big spikes during big conflicts or whatever, but in general, the blue line doesn't go up much. But this orange, but the production line, sorry, the destruction line doesn't go up very much. The production line does. So now actually the increase in production from prior to 2016 to after 2017 is like the entire destruction value added on top of it. So in other words, we were just piling up stuff. So suddenly everybody is like, literally we got people complaining because they should be able to tighten rat, when before 2015 it was considered to be unwise to even carry a rat, right? Like, it was out of control. Capitals were just objectively better than subcapitals in a lot of ways. And so ultimately, just having a fleet, you know, the nullsec group, like, the measure of your power was how big your capital fleet was and how many times you can replace it. The idea of being able to dock your capitals and asset safety them, super capitals rather, was pretty impactful to this too. In December 2020, what could possibly have happened? You know, one could speculate. You mean this big spike up here? This spike right here, the April to May? I can tell you exactly what that spike is. So the industry changes were announced around here, and the industry changes happened around here. Do you think CCP lost a lot of players due to scarcity? According to everything that they have said, which of course we'll get new stats in FanFest, but this has been good. The vast majority of the player base leaving has actually been the absence of alts. So another piece to this was that because of skill farms and stuff, people went from having one to three accounts to suddenly, like, it was pretty normal for people to have anywhere from 5 to 150 alts. And, you know, the idea of, like, it wasn't just that you mined in a rook wall, you had 20 rook walls out there. And so a lot of people have unsubbed those extra accounts without necessarily quitting. In addition to that, with the way that free-to-play games work, like, they're banking on the idea that at the other side of this process, they will end up with a better game that people will enjoy playing. And if they do that, then it won't matter how many people were angsty and decided to quit while they were gone, while they were going through that transitional period, right? Like, this very much is a ends justify the means kind of situation, where if the game can end up in a more popular, better state, in the end, then pretty much whatever it takes to get there is important, you know? And it's also worth noting that while Eve has declined in the last couple of years, Eve has actually declined at a slower rate than a lot of other MMOs, in particular, other MMOs purchased, or like, Black Desert Online and such. Yeah. Right, exactly. The thing is that like CCP doesn't want to be beholden to people who are willing to hold the game ransom to get what they want. They want to replace, to a certain extent, it would, I mean, not want, but like, I'm sure that no one would be overly upset if a lot of the more bitter people were replaced by people who enjoyed the lore, enjoyed, looking into the universe, that see, the problem is that CCP has always had a different vision than the players for EVE Online from the very beginning. And the thing is that like, while the player base likes to say like, oh, CCP, it's the big fights that generate the news and it's what CCP celebrates. It's actually not that true. And historically hasn't been. Like there was a period of time, in particular around 2015, 2016, in which the player base was, or like CCP was really focused on the player base, showing off stuff about the player base. This is where we get our This Is Eve trailer and all that stuff. But the problem is this. If we go to EVE Offline, we can see that window of time I have another chart for this too, and I also made another video about this. You can find it on YouTube's. But if you look, this fall off right here, this drop off, this beginning of the end, as it were, that you see here, this is BTAC-R. Basically, as soon as BTAC-R happened, we see this actual big. That's when the game took its turn down. And this period of time, this big trough here, this is 2015, 2016. The more CCP celebrated us, the worse the game did. On top of that, if you go and look, a lot of their advertisements are about the exploration, the mining, the sights to see, and all these kinds of things. They show off just going and looking at wormholes for its beauty, all these kinds of things. They celebrate things like Kariasai. They do everything within their power to highlight everything besides the big wars. The big wars highlight themselves. The big wars get themselves into the news. CCP gets in the news for drifter attacks, Caroline Star. They make videos talking about how exciting exploration can be. They do things like Project Discovery, right? So I think that the player base kind of projecting that EVE Online is this one strict thing, right? It's a sandbox. A sandbox means it can be a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And in a way, it can also be a place for a person that wants more structured content too, right? Like there shouldn't be you're wrong for Eve necessarily, or like a play style is quote unquote wrong for Eve necessarily. Like we should attempt to have as many different play styles as possible in existence in our universe. And I think that for a long time, see what happened was, when the Summer of Rage occurred, CCP had to admit that they were wrong and that they didn't know as much as the player base when it came to what to do next. Up until this point, they were the ivory tower. They basically didn't listen to player base at all. They just put things out from on high. Because up until that point, everybody had always told them that they couldn't possibly do what they were doing, and yet they did it over and over and over again. And it wasn't until the Summer of Rage that they fell on their face. and the player base said, "See, told ya." And that represented a turning point in which CCP somewhat turned over the game to the player base and let them kind of dictate what was important and stuff. And it's certain, like, we got it into our heads that we know this game better than the devs do, even though it is absolutely impossible for us to have any other view besides like from inside the trenches. So then a lot of people like to blame Pearl Abyss for the changes that happened. But from my understanding, it is closer to the fact that, like, during that year, the CSM in particular were pushing CCP in order to begin evaluating metrics better. Now, it might have been because they were preparing for a sale or something like that, that they ended up doing this, but they ended up focusing much more on metrics, how to track us. They put in new things into the game, so that way they could better create metrics based on our behavior. And they discovered the difference between what the player base says that they are and what they really are. For example, if the player base were the people that they said that they were before Blackout, Blackout wouldn't have been seen as a bad thing. As CCP Rise said, the thing that they learned from Blackout is that you can mess with PvP all day, but if you fuck with their PvE, people get really mad. And Blackout, sorry, not just Drifter attacks, but Blackout. My bad. Blackout, not Drifter attacks. And I think that that's important, that ultimately what we say is important isn't even necessarily important to us. These are just external or, end result processing of our feelings and our conclusions, right? So by looking at the actual statistics, by monitoring things in that way, they were able to get past survivor bias, get past their own preconceptions, and begin to analyze what actually makes things right. And they identified several things that were becoming a problem, including the economics of things. They saw that there was, botting had become far too powerful and far too prevalent. The market had been all but, trivialized. And that's one of the major things in the game. And that the ecology of things had been completely disrupted, because it used to be that everywhere had to trade with, like, no one had everything to be able to build what they wanted, but like with various things like sovereignty and ADMs, that was made less and less true, right? Nullsec no longer needed to import anything from HighSec for the most part, at least significantly less, because they could just provide, build it better just based on local production. Increasingly, we saw resources become more and more ubiquitous. And so if you see, the scarcity changes are mostly just corrections of those. They're not random, right? The market used to be gamified. So now they've changed the market so that way it's less about 0.01 ISK and now more about like good positioning. They changed PvE. So that way it's not just about how long you can do something or how expensive a thing you can do it in or how AFKable it is, that activities that require more engagement and more coordination have a larger reward, that is a consideration, because risk versus reward is broken in a world in which capital umbrellas exist. So we also see things like an absence in niches in industry, and it feeling to be like very difficult to get into. The problem is that Tech 1 industry is incredibly trivial, but most people just like can't figure out a way to get a profit off of it. But T2 industry requires a degree in logistics in order to manage. So what they did was they made it so that now you have kind of this middle part where battleships and capitals require a type of reaction that's very similar to, but more easier to get into than all of the reactions that's required for T2. So they make, staged releases. They make it so that the characters that use these giant AFK-able mining ships that are also incredibly defensible. Just the problem is that a roque wall is really good. 20 roque walls are just a very different. Like, it's the problem is that 20 roque walls aren't 20 times more exposed. They are stronger, right? They are harder to kill, significantly harder to kill because of each other. And so the forces it takes to actually take these down end up becoming kind of nuts compared to the kind of people that you would want to expect to be able to roam around and actually like do some damage. So turning away from the focus of the foreman ships becoming also like the tippy top mining ships and providing a reason to use different kinds of mining ships and different kind of mining lasers. The old crystal system was just stupid, right? Like, it just like, did you know what you're going to be mining? Fine, put in that crystal. Oh, you don't have the crystal? Then you should be using a Tech 1 strip miner. Like, that's blah. Like, so they needed to make a system with more meaningful choices, and we get the mining system that we have. But none of those, even though each one of those is an objectively more well-designed system, the people experiencing that change are disrupted, and it's painful. Does that make sense? But the thing is that CCP knows that they have a ton of people. They can bring people into the game anytime they want. Bringing in new people into the game is not difficult for them. Okay? It's keeping them past 3 hours into the game. That's the difficult part. So here's the thing. And I've said this before. Before this, their retention rate was like 3 to 4%. What that means is if they can change that retention rate to 6%, I know it's not, it's actually higher than that now. It's like up to 13% or something like that. Whatever. I don't even remember. But if they can raise that retention rate, it literally does not matter how many of us they lose in the process. Like, let's be real. There isn't that many of us because of the fact that we have survived in a world in which success in this game requires not just tenacity, not just smarts, but also a fair chunk of luck to stumble upon the correct answer. We rely on these incredibly rare events of like a player managing to run into a player and having both a negative experience and also being like friendly to them and therefore can become their new mentor or whatever, right? Like, we rely on these incredibly weird scenarios because that's what we tell each other in our survivor bias. But what we forget is all of the people that fail out, not because they suck. These are people that would be awesome for Eve. Probably better than the people that stick around. But Eve wasn't good enough for them. It didn't engage with them. It didn't reach out to them. It didn't give them any kind of direction or knowledge or reason to play it. And so they never got into it. If you had a herd of horses, you'd always want at least one donkey to run off. What the heck? Oh. So people wanted a reason for conflict. People wanted an end to stagnation. And CCP gave it to them. Now, they like to say, like, what I find funny is they'll say that CCP Rattati was ridiculous for saying scarcity breeds conflict. But I mean, they can say that they did it on their own, but scarcity seemed to have bred quite a bit of conflict, not just in the war, but economic conflict as well. I've said for a long time, there are two types of people. There are people that are complaining loudly about scarcity, and there are people quietly profiting from it. And what are they going to do to keep more new players? Make a game that engages with them, keeps them. So here's the thing. Okay. This is why I said the 100 hours thing the other day. So we're not going to worry about whether or not the game is going to be for the person. Okay. Let's not worry about the arguments of like, well, not Eve isn't for everybody. Like, great. That population, like the people that Eve isn't for, will fail out no matter what. We're not trying to save them. Okay. We're just putting that aside. If Eve Online is going to be the game for someone, something generally needs to happen within it that gets them going, right? That gives them direction, that leads them in. We often say like, oh, well, people need to find like a player group. This is a big indicator, whatever. That's just one way to hook into things. But whatever it is, you've got to be able to find your hook. You got to find your content. You got to like touch the meta in some way and get pulled into it. But the problem is that takes chance and time. So the longer you can keep a person in the game, the more likely they will have those events that allow them to then stay. They stay in long enough to get ganked. They stay in long enough to find a player corp. They stay long enough for something to happen. Most people quit because there's just nothing. Not because they got ganked. People quit long before that. And the problem is that that person who comes and finds nothing, they play the tutorial for an hour, and then afterwards, like all they have is the Sisters of Eve Epic Arc, which is just running around for another couple of hours, and then what? That game has engaged them for 3 hours. Congratulations. If you're not a confident enough pilot that also knows what you like and wants to do what you want to do, or find a person that can help you in those 3 hours, I guess Eve isn't for you. Bullshit. What if Eve the game, right? Your actual working with the game itself was interesting enough that it kept players engaged, right? Missions do an okay job. Like, think about it. Missions do a pretty decent job at keeping people retained. And missions are some of the most clunkiest, bullshit, oldest features in this goddamn game. Imagine if missions were actually reimagined to be closer to like a sandbox game kind of environment where there's, or closer to like Cosmos missions almost, where there are stories and things to discover and a reason to advance in different organizations and whatnot, things to people to learn about and agendas to advance or disrupt. And imagine if you could see that as not just being some missions that you're doing, but actually have impact on the game itself, right? Like as you do missions for your chosen group, you're actually advancing that group's overall agenda. And so then they win, they advance their agenda, and you can say that you helped contribute to that. That person stays in the game longer than 3 hours. That person stays in the game long enough to get past that feeling of lack of competence without having the mystery and majesty of the game being stripped away from it. That player has a bigger chance of staying and enjoying themselves, right? It's just like I do know a few people that joined or at least came back as part of the Doctor Who event. And the thing is that the Doctor Who event had real progress. It wasn't just how many sites that you can run and grind up a bar, right? It wasn't about how many tier 5 sites that you could run, because you couldn't even run them. You couldn't run them. You couldn't build the keys. You didn't have the stuff. You had to first go get this stuff to build the first tier of keys, and then build those, and then start running those sites to get the second. It took several days of advancement to get to the quote unquote end, when you can start running the sites that are very, very dangerous and have the best loot. That kept people engaged. It kept me engaged. Rushlock was talking about it, kept him engaged. A lot of people have talked about how that made him engaged. You can engage, you can make PvE engaging. And by doing that, the entire time, the thing is that a player doesn't have any confidence or knowledge of their own competence. But if you can keep getting them to just keep playing, give them a reason to keep playing, doing the stuff, you know, even if all you're doing is missions, right? When you first start playing missions, you don't even remember how to warp right. You leave your drones behind all the time. You often don't know anything about ammo. Slowly but surely, you master each piece as you try to get a little bit further and a little bit further in missions. Make it so that you make more is per tick in missions, and you start to refine yourself and get, like, you know, you get better fits and you get better strategies, and you go after specific rat types and all these kinds of things. Guess what? You're now becoming more competent at the game, not just in your advanced knowledge, but guess what? The more you pilot, the more you're building these muscle memory, right? Abyss is great, not just because it is active gameplay or it's, you know, interesting or more difficult. It's that the act of piloting in the Abyss teaches you how to pilot and gives you an opportunity to practice your piloting, right? This is why I advise against Abyss strategies that are brain dead or whatnot. And I advocate for doing things like trying to maximize your extractors without increasing your time, right? I focus on the little challenges. I work on my manual piloting. I work on different weapon strategies. I try out different things. Why? Because when it's time to do it for real in PvP, I want all of my piloting to be second nature. I want it all to be, I don't want to think about how to do something. I just want to think that I need to do something. And you don't get that practice in PvP. It's too short. It takes a long time. I mean, you can, but look at the stories of the people that do. Think about how much they go through. And, you know, God bless them for fighting their way through it, losing ship after ship after ship. Look at Joe Bain and the amount of pain he went through in order to teach himself how to fight. And that's good. It's a good thing. But if someone could teach themselves some of those foundations without them happening 5 seconds at a time, I think that that person could then evolve to take on the same level of challenge that Joe Bain is, but not feel like they've been left high and dry by the game itself, right? A game that doesn't have a satisfactory tutorial or that doesn't explain itself anymore to you, that isn't hard for, you know, in a good way anymore. We don't consider that to be like a good quality of a game. That's a game failing to teach you. A game can be hard, but difficulty doesn't come from it being obtuse. Yeah, CCP made burners to let people practice tactics and overheating. That's the thing. So CCP doesn't teach a lot, but they test a lot. When we say that something teaches something, it's not like there's a pop-up that explains it to you. It teaches you it because it tests you on that and requires that skill. Like, for instance, the hunt that's coming up. It doesn't teach you D-scan, but people learn D-scan through the hunt. In other words, they get good at it. They practice it. You can mechanically know how to D-scan, but it isn't until you go out there and do it a couple hundred times in a few days that you really start to get good at it. And more importantly, confident at it, right? When you first start, you know, even if you know how to hunt down these eggs, it still takes you a little while. You have to remember, you make mistakes. You have to plan out how you want to deal with your overview. You've got to, you know, all these sorts of things. Within an hour or two, you are a pod finding machine. You've worked out the little details. You found the little quirks within a few hours. And you know what? The next time you need to hunt down somebody, it won't even be a question for you how to do a D-scan. You'll just simply think, I need to see whether or not they're at this site, and you'll have done it because you will have built your muscle memory on it. Teaching stuff from loss isn't very effective on new people, agreed. Except for it is. And a lot of games teach you that that is the case. The issue is not that death is too big of a punishment. I believe that the act of engaging with the PvE doesn't provide enough advancement, right? Like, I think that the real problem here isn't that losing ships is terrible. It's that you aren't given enough of the basic ships to make it so that you feel the loss. You don't want to lose. It'll hurt your pride, but you're not afraid to do the task that will put you in that position, right? Difficult to get basic ships and bad early progression is I can't remember my point because I got distracted by a different point. Like, imagine if every storyline mission came with a T1 ship, right? Like a level 1 storyline mission comes with a destroyer. Level 2 storyline mission comes with man, you guys are triggering me with this Magic 14 thing. Level 2 storyline missions come with a cruiser. Level 3 comes with a battle cruiser. Whatever. Maybe. Sure. Maybe one step up. I don't know. Whatever. My point is that people cannot advance. And hold on. Before everybody's freaking out, like in the comments or whatever, I'm not... Yes, those are ships that are built by players. But that's my whole point. Like, because of that, it makes it so that they're... What we ask for new players to do, we neither teach them how nor even communicate to them that they need to do it. Right? This is why they can sell. This is why they feel the need that they have to sell retrievers for money. It's because just giving somebody the money or the Plex isn't sufficient. That they don't know, they're not confident in how to build a fit. Like, that's the real problem, right? Like, they don't. The act of playing the game doesn't help you advance. The amount of ISK that the amount of grinding that you have to do to go up the levels, and the amount of ISK that you get, or the resources I should say that you get, because it doesn't always have to be ISK, could very well be made in such a way that it encourages you to be bold. But it ended up being a job at home just to make ends meet to keep playing. I guess it depends on what you're doing. We'll be wrong with giving a ship for missions only. So the giving them a ship temporarily. I really like that idea, right? Because think about it this way: you're working for somebody. Why not use their equipment, right? Here, use this ship. It's got the transponders and everything we need. Take this ship and go and do this. Right? That would be cool. Oh yeah, no, I've already, the I think that they should like introduce the Academy as a series of simulations. Absolutely. The new player missions do give ships. Yeah, but yes, exactly. But here's my point. That's the part that seems to kind of work, right? Like, career agents, even though they're kind of shit, like, that act of progression ends up being very important for new players, getting to their destroyers. But the problem is that at that point, progression ends. And there's this weird gap between the end of the NPE, which leaves you off at destroyers, and the beginning of anything meaningful, which seems to begin around cruisers, right? Like, you end the NPE and you're like, oh, can I get into the Abyss? No. Well, or not no, but, it might be expensive. I guess they've made that a little bit better with frigate and destroyer rooms, or setups. But I think I still stand by my point. Making ships T1 ships cheaper, I think, was a big step in that direction. But the point is, here we go. The point is not whether a new player can progress. It's, does a new player know and understand how to progress? A player that doesn't know what to do because they don't understand the mechanics yet and they're trying to learn, and they've had their own understanding of it subverted because of a trick or like a puzzle or whatever in a game, that works. Feeling that you don't know the game because the game has failed to teach you feels really shitty. Because how do they even know what to learn? Even if they Google it, they're going to find old information. Even if they get information from other players, they're going to get old, bad and translated information and bias. So what do you do? What if you want to learn to master this game? What if you want to get good? Does Eve give the tools to a person who wants to get good to actually do so using the game? I would argue no. And yes, a lot of Eve is taught best by players, but not core mechanics. It does not, I do not require a player to explain to somebody the different resistances. You do not need a player to explain to you tracking. You do not need a player to explain to you micro warp drive bloom or any of these other things. You might need a player to explain to you how to use the micro warp drive trick or how to spiral or how to slingshot. You see the difference between those two? There's a difference between how to pilot or how to fly the ship and how to actually pilot the ship, right? Like the tactics to use, the techniques to use. There's a difference, right? We've accepted what we have because it's what we have. And the few of us who have made it, like, that's great. But think about all the people who have failed. Think of all the people that Eve has failed, I should say, that could get into it, that would love a game with this kind of complexity. Don't tell me that people want an easy game. As I said before, Elden Ring right now is a big deal. So people want a complicated, difficult game, but they want it to be fair. And they want to be able to feel like the reason why they don't, like, every bad thing that happens to you is learning something. And it happened for a reason. You didn't know it for a reason. You were hubris. You charged forward. You went deeper than you should have, and you knew it. You were leaving and pushing out of your bounds of knowledge, and now you've learned new things, and some of that punished you. That isn't how it works in Eve. You go out there, you explode, you're like, I don't know what the fuck happened. Nothing in missions teaches you something that gives you competence or confidence to move on to the next thing, or even suggests you go to the next thing. Every mechanic in the game, even though everything's economically interconnected, the mechanics themselves basically draw you further and further into themselves. You know? All I'm saying is that the game itself could be improved to both be interesting to engage with as PvE and better at providing people the tools by which to learn the game. Something as simple as the addition of attributes that were added onto the show info of rats that tell you the damage types that you need to do and the damage types that they're going to do. Like, that is a huge step in the right direction when it comes to giving people the information that they need in order to learn. Let them have to look, but let the information be there. You do, yes, I understand that you enjoy having to compile the information on your own, but that's what I'm saying is that like I feel like this is compatible with that. Rather than having to have another player compile it for you and giving it to you, have it be like as you explore, you find more, you get deeper and deeper, but the game actually gives you the tools to sort it out. Exploration is a really good example of this, right? Like exploration is one of those things that like it teaches you some of the basics, but over time you start to question and examine and learn pieces of it that aren't taught to you in the basic mechanics. The whole time you're hacking, right? You don't, there's never a time that you don't know enough to finish a hack. Well, I mean, past the base, like by the time you get out of the tutorial, you should be back around that point. But there is a lot, you can get a lot of time built into it as you begin to slowly but surely get better, faster, more knowledgeable, know what kind of cans to hack, know which sites to go to. You get what I'm saying? Like that's a way for somebody to be able to get deeper into it. But there's so much of this game that don't give you those tools. Here's on the flip side, wouldn't it be logical if somewhere in the agency it showed you all of the different defense mechanism nodes and tools that you can pick up and what difficulty each of them appear in? Wouldn't that be something that would be nice to have in the exploration section of the agency? Don't you feel like that's something that somebody might want to refer to in order to feel like they're gaining some sort of mastery into the subject? I think so. It's little things like that. It's making it so like show info is good, but a lot of people, first of all, people are rarely taught show info. It's kind of clunky to do. I would much rather all that stuff be part of the agency as part of like a giant encyclopedia. Also replace, rebrand the agency as Aura, as I've said many, many times. I would get involved in a player group and find friends that you can do a certain activity with. What activity? Brutal. What activity? That's the problem, right? I mean, I say it too all the time. Just find out what you want to do and then find a group that does it. As if like that first half of that sentence is somehow easy or, not luck based, like, the game does not encourage you to dabble and to learn. The game encourages you to find the answer and then become the best at doing the answer. And that is boring. I actually, like, one of the things I was thinking about was a lot of other MMOs have a certain limit. So there's this new change happening in Echoes, right? Because Echoes missions are not like Eve's in the fact that, like, you don't have to go to the agent in Echoes. The agent comes to you. You guys got me ranting again for, like, I said I was getting off like 45 minutes ago. So the agents, let me see if I can pull it up in a way that you guys can see. The missions are called encounters in Echoes. So, it's going to say I'm lost connection. Hold on. They're called missions, or they're called encounters in Echoes. And the way it works is that you're given a certain number of encounters to choose from. You pick the difficulty level of the missions that you're going for. but then it gives you a handful of different missions for you to choose from. And you can choose from that where to go. You don't have to actually go talk to an agent at all. So like here, oh, so like there's the different missions that I have available for me. And every 30 minutes, I can refresh this and it'll give me new missions. Now, some of them are worth more, some of them are rarer, some of them are further away, some of them are closer. There's usually at least a couple that are pretty close to you wherever you go. But the problem with this method, as opposed to the method in Eve, is that this is extremely bottable. And combine that with the fact that there's no high side ganking means that there's a big problem with bots and other accounts, as they call it, violators, using the mission system to basically harvest a lot of wealth because they can just infinitely cycle them and just keep running them all day long. So they've made it so that now there's going to be a diminishing return. So if you run like 50 missions in a day, after that, they're going to be worth less. 50 missions is a lot, first of all, but it got me thinking that a lot of other video games, like in Final Fantasy XIV, I get rewarded for doing all kinds of different dungeons. It gets me to do dungeons that I normally wouldn't even do, right? That way they can get people to run leveling dungeons and to get dungeons that may not always have, as the population levels up, there are still people running the earlier dungeons in order to do their dailies. But once you've done the one, that's it. You don't get to do it again. So, or at least not for the increased reward. So the game encourages you to branch out and to do to touch everything that you can within your purview a little bit, rather than commit to one thing and all into it for the whole day. Now, you still can if you want to. If there's something that you need, I've gone all in a whole day where I was just, crafting or leveling up a character or something like that. When legitimately it would have been more efficient for me to like jump between tasks. But I wonder if, like, obviously the player base would probably not be happy with it, but what if there was some sort of bonus for your first time that you do any given thing in a day, right? Like, what if the first mission that you do, or first two missions that you do, has a bonus reward on it? And then the first anomaly you run has a bonus reward on it based on its base value. So you'll want to go do a better one. What if the first exploration site comes with something? Not just something that you grind for points for like a track, but only once. So you have to do as many different things in a day as possible. I want to believe that would help people learn more aspects of the game and therefore get comfortable with more aspects of the game. Now, do I actually think that this should be done? No, absolutely not. Not in that crude of a method, but it's getting me to think about motivation and rewards, right? Because the thing is that, like, you want to reward someone extrinsically such that they can find their intrinsic reward. And once they find that, then you're golden, right? I can run missions, and I do so casually or not so casually. The other night, I went into an exploration ship and I did some yeet exploration in anathema, and I intentionally went and hunted for some information. I wasn't even hacking a lot of sites. I was literally I was going through LowSec, documenting certain things in a region that I have lived in for years, and trying to look at how the population is, what sort of stations are where, what planets are where, the minor victories, and all these kinds of things. Just poking around, looking at things, and every once in a while hacking a can and feeling like I'm advancing myself. That entire experience didn't earn me but 40 million ISK. And it took me 4 or 5 hours. But anyone who thinks that it was a waste is a fool. if anything, Eve as a game teaches us the wrong priorities. Yeah. People would feel forced to do content that they don't like. Okay. Or maybe not even like a daily thing. Well, like, look, hey, if you feel forced to do something because there's a reward that's bonus on top of it that isn't exclusive to the thing, or, you know, isn't something that should matter to you, then that's you and your psychology as far as I'm concerned, right? Like, if they offered a new event that where everybody mined, yeah, the mining blitz events, right? That didn't force people to mine. It gave people the opportunity. And this notion of, I don't want to be forced to do this, equating to, you cannot give us the opportunity to do that, is just oppressive and bullshit. And one of the problems that that the player base has inflicted upon the game. I still do Praetorium. I legitimately love doing Praetorium, but again, I am again one of those people that are like refinement, right? So I do it as a tank. So even though I've run it, you know, 20 times now, I try to remember, like, I'm memorizing every pull. I'm making it into one giant dance as I go. I'm gaining mastery, you see? And that's making me better at other dungeons that I do. I hope you can see the parallel there. Well, you're forced to plex, but you don't, or you don't get the full game experience. Yes. You understand how good of a thing that is, right? You understand that that's like essential to keeping Eve not terrible. You understand that, like, Eve being a subscription-based game and not a true free-to-play game is objectively a good thing for us. What do you want CCP to be more incentivized to do? Keep subscribers or make people buy microtransactions? Which of those two do you want CCP to be more focused on? Now, obviously, they're going to be on both. But as long as the game is mostly focused on a subscription first and foremost, and it's a subscription-based game, then you're the one paying for the content. You're the one paying for a quality game, right? Keep subscription, give me anime keep stars. Hey, man, I'm all about it. It's a sandbox. Don't tell me that there shouldn't be cat ears. If there's cat ear, if you want an anime keep star, you should be able to put up an anime keep star. And if somebody else doesn't like it, they can either tear it down or piss and moan weekly about it because it's yours. You put it in the sandbox, and if somebody else can't take it from you, it's there. That's the way that the sandbox works. All right, guys. I am going to take off. I am going to take off. Why I wonder why they haven't done it then? I'm guessing a series of complicated reasons. I have been Asherothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put Eve into context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you all for coming and watching. Today we went over the Garistus and some information about the hunt and looking at some of the stuff going on Singularity that's coming. We do expect a patch tomorrow with the new login rewards, the new jump portal bridge, and some of that other stuff potentially, and the Proteus buff. We also expect on Thursday to get the hunt, which is the upcoming Garistus event that takes place predominantly in Garistus low second venal, which is destroyer down content. And it also has a hacking thing, so we're going to look into that. There's new boosters coming, new drugs. That's going to be cool. We're going to keep on covering all of that as we go forward. And of course, thank you guys for such a great discussion. I know that like some of you guys feel like you're, trying to be hostile or whatever, but like I love those kinds of questions because I feel like these questions deserve answers, right? And real ones. I'm not just a white knight. I need to be able to prove to you guys that when I say something about, when I defend something about CCP, it's not because I'm just like blind. It's because that particular aspect is strong, whereas another thing is probably bullshit, right? So I'm here for you guys, and intentionally so. In fact, I generally don't go after sponsorships or anything like that, and I'm not going to run for the CSM. I'm not going to join CCP necessarily. I don't know. Maybe I might, but I haven't yet so far. No, because I feel like I'm most valuable on this side of the fence, working for you, right? I don't, this is my full-time job. The donations and the subs and the following on YouTubes and all that kind of stuff. This is what lets this whole thing happen. And it gives me an opportunity to take care of my son too, which I really, really, really appreciate. But yeah, we're going to keep on going with this wild ride starting tomorrow, where hopefully we'll either be looking at patch notes, Valkyrie, or both. But if you're interested in supporting what I do, you can do so by simply going. The easiest thing is to just go over to YouTube and sub to my channel if you haven't already, and check out some videos, share them, whatever. If you want to take the next step up, I also make a video game called Playton. I'd love it if you tried it and showed it around. Tell me what you think about it. I want to make some updates to it. If you want to take things up to the next step, you can always sub to my Twitch and get all those cool emotes. Or you can join those on Patreon, who I really, really appreciate their support, make this all happen. And their names get listed all on my videos and on the ticker and all that stuff. If you're interested in coming and helping me, maximize player engagement with EVE Online, the Convocation of Empyreans are recruiting. And there also is a Notion that we put out, which has all kinds of information. That's not it. Whatever. Fine. That video or that link is part of the Notion. You can find the rest of it from there, where I try to provide tools and resources for not just the members of the Convocation of Empyreans, but for everybody. We're here to help everyone get into EVE Online deeper and raise the overall literacy of the game, because I think that's the best way that we can improve the game, improve our experience, and improve our hobby. Let's find somebody to raid.